Alright, here we are back again. So since last time, I've done some checking for bottlenecks on the factory internals, found a few places that I had a belt that was just slightly too slow, that sort of thing. There are some other issues that I've been having that I think are caused by some aspects of mergers that hadn't occurred to me before. So this section here is an example of that, but I think a better example is over here. So the way that this was supposed to work was that I have some production of iron going on here. I think about 45 per minute, because I'm splitting one and combining with the full output of another. And that goes up to this splitter, which feeds a couple of machines. And those machines combined should be consuming like just almost exactly the production here, but slightly less. And my idea was that that slight overage of iron ingots would get on this line and go all the way down here to combine with another line of iron production to feed some other machines down there. And what was happening was, when I first hooked it up, these machines were very underfed. Sorry, this lift and that lift were very underfed, and that was expected. You know, the remaining production was going down this line, and because the splitter was splitting evenly, so as a result, 1/3 of the output was coming down here, when in reality, you know, ultimately, I wanted only about, like, 2% of the production to be going down here. But I thought that that would be fine. My thinking was, okay, so it's going to hit this merger, and eventually it's going to back up, because the machines all the way down there can't consume the full output of this, you know, the full, like, 1/3 of that production that was getting put onto here. Most of it was going to be in excess, so I figured it would back up to the merger, back up this line slowly all the way to those machines. But that is not how it worked, and I think I understand now why that would be the case. And it's because the full output of this was coming down here, but the merger is just going to pick evenly between all available inputs, as in, when it has an opportunity to put an iron ingot on this belt, it's going to check through all of its available inputs, and any that are providing iron ingots, it's going to take equally from them. You know, first one from this one, then one from this one. And the reality is that even though this was overproducing compared to what I wanted it to produce, it was dramatically underproducing compared to this line. This line has so many iron ingots on it. It's a Mark II line, whereas this is a Mark I, and it wouldn't even be a fully filled Mark I. You'd be getting something like maybe 15 to 20 per minute on this belt. So as a result, the splitter was fully consuming that input and dumping it out onto here. And instead, what was happening is it was backing up this line all the way back to my smelters and causing them to shut down. So I thought about it for a long while, and I thought, like, well, maybe I can, like, speed this line up so that, but that's not really going to help. The issue is that there's only so many ingots being put on here, And because mergers take evenly from all inputs, it's just always going to empty this input before it empties this input, and thus the backup is more likely to occur, basically guaranteed to occur, on this line, this Mark II line, because it's full of ingots, essentially nonstop. So I think the core issue here actually is that I shouldn't be relying on backups through mergers, because with something like a splitter, these splitters, for example, the reason why a manifold works is because if one of your splitter outputs backs up, like this one was just then, it's deterministic, or it's very predictable what will happen in that case. This backs up, so this line gets more output because the splitter is, it still has available space to output. That's like basically guaranteed, or it is guaranteed with a manifold setup, so long as it's working properly. So as a result, this will back up, but the backup will never propagate to the input line, or at least it won't propagate significantly. If the full input here is at a rate that can be consumed by all of these machines, you'll never see this backup propagate all the way back to your producers. Maybe there's some cases where, for example, you could see a minor backup there that gets immediately consumed. Maybe if you had your producer, right inches from this splitter, maybe it's theoretical that, if you had machines with very long cycle times, for example, that you could have some kind of backup on this. But it's much more predictable. If your total input rate is less than the total consumption of these machines, then a backup here is going to mean more output here, which feeds a further machine, which is going to consume it. So it's a useful design. But mergers are kind of different, because in a merger's case, a backup here means that it's going to immediately propagate to an input, maybe multiple inputs, maybe just one input. It can be kind of hard to tell, unless you have, all identical inputs to a merger, in which case they should back up more or less identically. If you have any sort of variability in the inputs to a merger, in terms of the rate at which they're inputting resources, then it can become very, very hard to predict where a backup is going to propagate from a merger. So, because of that, I think that in the future, when I'm designing things like this, I need to make sure that I'm not relying on backups from mergers. And what that really means is that if I'm planning to have a merger further down the line, I shouldn't have a consumer of any kind prior to that merger. Because the issue here was that I have consumers here that need more input than is being supplied by the splitter trivially. So I was relying on a backup coming from the merger, and I just could not rely on that to back up in the way that I thought it would. So anyhow, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. I guess technically, so I could have a consumer here if it was guaranteed to be supplied completely by that splitter. If, for example, this was a 60 per minute and each of these lifts only needed 15 per minute, then I think I could do it safely. But this isn't safe because it relies on this belt backing up to the point where this splitter actually feeds these machines enough resources. So yeah, anyhow, been doing a lot of thinking on that. It's kind of a design flaw in the factory. There's a couple places where I do something like that. So I felt like that was the best example because it was so egregious. But it doesn't really matter. I think that like the total output in excess of these machines' consumption is like 2 ingots per minute or something like that I wanted to merge onto this line. So as a result, I don't think it really matters. These machines will technically be getting a little less resource than they theoretically need, or at least I think they need to operate at absolute efficiency. But for now, at least, I'm fine leaving it as is, and maybe it's something I'll think about a bit more and come back and try to correct after the fact. What's worse is this setup for these smelters, because I'm doing a very similar thing where I have splitters forming a manifold back here, and then I have one of the outputs leading into a merger. And my thinking was that too many resources would come into this merger. There would be a backup that occurs all the way down this manifold to this merger, and then it would propagate up this line. But it's actually going to propagate up this line because this is the faster line with many more resources per minute coming in. So it was actually causing my production to shut down. So I ended up limiting this a fair bit so that there's less resource going over here. But it's still going to back up here eventually. I had it going faster earlier, and it was instead causing a backup on this line, causing these smelters to starve. So yeah, I'm going to have to do some rethinking of exactly how I distribute this. And again, the core issue here is that this manifold setup was relying on this line to back up to operate efficiently. But instead, because it's going into a merger and there's a much more resource-heavy input over here, it is vastly more likely that the backup would propagate up this line instead and shut down production. So, hope that makes sense. I spent a lot of time pondering this. It's not a problem I've actually run into in this game, or at least not noticed that I was running into in this game before. So it took me a lot of time sort of staring at machines and wondering why miners were shutting down and smelters were shutting down, to sort of puzzle through how I'm imagining this is happening. But hopefully that makes sense. Also, since last time, you may notice our starter base is gone. This whole area has finally been cleared out, and I've left behind the hub and, equipment workshop, the MAM, just because I don't really know where else to put them as of yet. And over here I have a lot of excess resource that came from dismantling everything that I'm now feeding into the awesome sink from a whole bunch of storage containers. It looks like they're making good progress. It's chewing through most of these at this point. But yeah, so many resources that were just constantly filling my inventory, and I didn't really know what to do with, so I'm sinking the vast majority of them. Now, the exceptions are this reanimated Sam over here, which I'm just hanging on to, even though the truck station is unpowered, and the truck that would do the deliveries I've just gone ahead and disassembled. And I also kept Quickwire which I moved into this storage container, and rotors, which I moved over here, because neither of those resources is being produced in our new essentials factory. So this surplus that I kept is basically all we have to work with for a while. Ooh, there's a little rogue foundation piece over here. Better get rid of that. Last few remnants probably lurking around. But yeah, it was kind of sad to see this starter factory setup go. But you know, you're always redesigning for bigger and better things, and this new factory of ours serves almost the same purpose and much more efficiently than our starter factory. And I do intend to put in like a truck depot set up here, probably with some conveyor lifts coming down from up here, because that's where all of our resources are coming out, is onto the roof, and then either going into the dimensional depot or to the truck stations via those lifts, or to the awesome sink. So that is the thinking. For now, though, I figured it was time to start thinking about the next factory a little bit. I'm going to have a lot of planning to do on that. So I think the next one I want to focus on is our exotics factory, which I'm planning to build out here. And my thinking for that is to include a lot of steel products, as well as SAM. So I want to include SAM fluctuators, at least in that, which I think are made with steel and reanimated SAM. So that is very convenient for this area. And I was noticing, I think I had speculated before that the SAM node was under here. Ah, yeah, I put some foundations to mark it at some point. There's a section here that can be detonated, and I'd speculated the SAM node was under there. It is not. It is actually directly under this arch. So if we fly over here, we can see there's this enormous pit here that I had just never really realized was in this room when I came through initially. But there's our SAM miner directly down there. So instead of doing all of this, let me just grab this slug while I'm here. Nice. But instead of doing all of the belting that I was doing to pull this reanimated SAM out of here and then all the way through this cave network, I'm thinking I'll just set up a conveyor lift setup to lift it directly out of here and then pull it into our exotics factory, which should be set up right around here, I'm thinking. Something like that. I'm imagining that we'll have a truck station right around here. This seems like a nice area. Hello. Gosh, they make like the most horrifying back-breaking noises sometimes. But yeah, I wanted to get a quick sense for what resources were available over here so that I could start to actually plan out this factory. And then, oh wow, there's a whole mess over there. Okay, so 2 impure nodes, 2 normal nodes, very conveniently placed. 2 more normal nodes, not too far. Oh, and then 2 more normal nodes beyond that. Okay, that is a lot of iron. That is way more than I thought. So I think that's 6 normal nodes, 2 impure. Oh, copper. I completely forgot copper. That is important. So it looks like we've got a couple. A normal and a normal. 2 normal. Oh, there's more than I thought. Okay, we are close to that, like, crater area that has quite a bit. And then coal, I think, is just, like, the one pure node that's, yeah, right there. Am I, getting somebody upset? Yeah, I don't think you can get to me, though. Oh. Oh, there is a pure node. Not very far away. That might be worth pulling in, because coal is important for steel production. So if the coal isn't much further... It's a little further. Oh, hello. I don't necessarily have to come for that coal, because I do have alternate recipes, like iron pipe, which essentially mean I can just pull straight from iron to produce quite a few things. You know, I can bypass coal to get steel pipe straight from iron, and then I think I've got recipes that let me use that steel pipe to make, like, stators or something like that. I'm not sure if I'll do that here. Oh yes, that is the default, is to use steel pipe and copper to produce stators. Yeah, okay, at least I've got some stuff to ponder. I'll probably spend some time looking over recipes and trying to figure out a design for this whole place. And yeah, at some point, I'm gonna have to tear up this reanimated Sam line that I made forever ago, just to get it temporarily available. And, you know, hopefully find a much better way to pull Sam out under that arch, rather than traversing through the entirety of the cave system to do it. And I don't know. I don't necessarily have to pull from under the arch. I could pull from that crevasse that we opened up over here just a bit ago. I do already have the line there. Okay, well, something to think about. Alright, here we are in front of the Essentials Factory. And as you can see, I've done a little bit of work out here, trying to get it set up for some truck depots here in just a bit. So yeah, it's just 4 conveyor lifts coming down all the way from the top floor down to here. And then I figure I'll set up some ramps leading this way, maybe that way as well, and then out on this side. And put 4 little truck depot stations here. We will see how that goes. I've also done some refactoring of the power tower setups a bit. I replaced them with the blueprint that I had leading off towards the coal plant. And I also have routed my variable power network over here, and then over to that train station there. So now, hopefully, we've got, like, the oil processing setup should still be on the same static power network, but the trains and truck stations over there should be on the variable power network. And in fact, you can tell when the train is moving pretty easily based off of this consumption graph. So, like, for instance, I feel like, well, I'm probably going to call it wrong in this case, but this big upward spike is definitely the train leaving a station. And then the way it kind of, like, plateaus, very, very slowly decreasing, forming this, like, long tailing here, I'll bet that's the train leaving the oil processing plant. almost certainly, because there's a big hill leading up from the oil processing station to there. There's another hill that it should have just gone up. Yeah. I just think it's so cool that you can sort of tell what terrain the train is going over just by looking at the power grid. Yeah, it should be coming into that station here pretty soon. Yep, there it is. Can see it through the tree there. The other thing that has happened is if you look in the upper right, you'll notice that we have finally finished production of all of those. What are they? They're not motors. Industrial engines? Something like that? I always forget this one. Modular engines. So that's all done. And now we should go ahead and get, what is it, like smart control units? Adaptive control units producing. So I think that I have all the materials for that laid out. So I've switched this over to making adaptive control units. I think it should just be a matter of running that there, and then Mark 2 to there, Mark 1 to there. And you should start producing here very soon. And then you will start up next. We're going to have yeah, it is statters going into there. Circuit boards. Modular frames, heavy modular frames. Oh, is that top one reversed? That's a mistake. Oh, well, it'll still work. And computers. Okay, so already got, guess that's a... Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm mixing things up, because it's... Statters are used to make automated wiring, and that's needed for the space elevator part. Okay, so theoretically, that should get going. Again, it's just one machine producing as fast as it can, assuming I've set everything up correctly. It should be 100% efficient, once everything starts flowing in here. And I think that... What's the crafting time on this? 1 per minute, so 100 minutes, so a little less than 2 hours. And that should be done, which it'll definitely take me longer than that to get really started on the exotics factory, so we should be good. Alright, hey there, I figured I'd just loop you all back in. So, one thing that I did was I did finally decide to come back and take a look at this manifold design over here and redo it. So if you remember before, I had this line going into a manifold that would then go off towards the left, and it was also split going slightly to the right and then merging in with this line. And that was causing all kinds of weird backup issues where I would end up with either a backup on this side, which would propagate up and shut down this miner, or a backup on this side, which would propagate up and shut down the other miner. So in this case, all I did was I took the same belt input setup and I just evenly divided them between miners. Because of underclocking, I had to do this a little strangely because there are 4 smelters down here at the end which are at full clock rate, and everything else, the remaining 13 in that line, sorry, there's another line over here that's unrelated, but the remaining 13 in that line were all underclocked to 28. So what I did was, first, each of these lines goes into a splitter, which splits off a Mark 1 belt, and I take each of those and feed 2 full clock rate smelters off of each of those Mark 1s, 1 pulled from each line. And then I take the remainder and pipe that through, or belt, not pipe, belt that through a manifold, which feeds 6.5 of these 28 permanent smelters. And what I mean by the half is that each of these manifolds, one coming in from the right towards the middle and one coming in from the left towards the middle, merge here to feed the very last smelter. So in a way, I'm not doing what I was describing before, or I'm doing what I was afraid of, which is having a whole bunch of splitters that, rely on backing up and then a merger afterwards. However, in this case, I think it is safe and predictable because the input rate of each of these 2 belts should be exactly aligned. They're literally mirrored input lines, including the way that I pull off this belt beforehand. So because the rate of ore hitting at this point should be exactly the same between the 2, I don't expect any surprising backup mechanics from this merger. And I do believe that everything's been running really smoothly. So, I think these would be the machines most likely to experience oddness if this merger was causing any issues. And both of them have been humming along at 100% for quite a while now, at least to my knowledge. And the same should go for everything in the line. I don't think I've seen any of these shut down for quite a while now since I redesigned this, including the 30 permanent ones on the end, because they should be getting exactly what they need. You'll notice that they never actually backed up at all because the input rate is so precise. These belts can only hold 60 per minute. So, of course, they fill immediately, but they only fill exactly to what these machines are demanding, because each is 30 apiece. So yeah, they don't even ever back up. They're just going to sit here at the same level forever. At least, that's my assumption. But yeah, finally got all of this working efficiently, which in turn means that our steel plate production should be working efficiently, which in turn means that, reinforced iron plates should be working efficiently, etc., etc. There are still some oddities in the factory. Specifically, this line is still just disconnected because I haven't figured out how to get that operating efficiently. But that's something I'll look at eventually. And so this smelter line occasionally shuts down. I'm also beginning to wonder if I just got some ratio wrong over here. I was messing with some double splitting mechanics here, trying to get the ratios more correct. I still think it's incorrect, so I don't figure I'll go through that. I'm beginning to wonder if I'm honestly just overproducing ingots for the screw production that this is all feeding into up here. But that's something I'll look at in a bit. Or, I'm not terribly worried about it. It would be nice if everything was running perfectly efficiently, though. You can see it's pretty steady, and every once in a while I end up with a period like this where it seems like it's running just about perfectly, At least I assume these plateaus are all the machines running at once. It's just not quite exact. As I said, I think that corner is basically to blame for all of that, but it's something I haven't fully tracked down yet. The other reason I wanted to turn this on is because while I was talking, I think we have finally finished up the last of those, what is it, control units for the space elevator. So that is phase 3 complete. And I figure it's time to go ahead and pull the lever and actually unlock some new milestones for us to work on. Yeah, everything's there. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed that I just did this by setting up a single machine and not, properly automating this, hand feeding all the resources, but it does work pretty effectively when I've got a lot of other things to work on that are going to take a tremendous amount of time, like this factory and figuring out my power situation and planning out the exotics factory and electronics. At least I had this going. So, yeah, got phase 3 complete, all off of the backs of that single manufacturer, just over a long period of doing other things. Let's give it a go.
Welcome to the Project Assembly Pioneer Progress presentation. Congratulations, the Phase 3 project part shipment is finally ready for delivery. On delivery, Phase 3 will be completed and the main body will be constructed. You should know how this works by now. You'll get access to Tiers 7 and 8 in the hub. In fact, perhaps you should just go look at the technologies there yourself. It's all laid out so that even a monkey could understand it, so you should have no issues. Speaking of which, I don't think you need a reminder about project parts. Instead, I will be providing some interesting facts. Did you know the average pioneer succeeds at saving the day? Did you know the average pioneer knows how to optimize pipe throughput? Did you know the average pioneer stays late at work because they care about humanity? Anyway, I thought you might want to know more about your peers. Good luck in Phase 4.
Beautiful. Let's do it.
Phase 3 of Project Assembly completed. Fixit's predictions indicate pioneers should generally reach this point faster with above-average results, but we should all adjust our expectations according to the situation. It is understandable. The pressure and complexity will only increase from here, so be sure to take on Phase 4 with efficiency and competence.
Well, there we go. That's quite the impressive structure at this point. So we just built the main body, but the main body of what? I still don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's some kind of ship that we're building, or... I almost want to say that, like, main body is kind of a joke, that it's like Ada's going to, like, inhabit this thing? Kind of become its brain, and it's gonna become her body? But I really don't know. Because it could just mean, like, main body of the whatever the heck, like the central structure. Let's take a look at these milestones. Okay. Bauxite refinement. Yeah, I don't think I have ever gotten to unlocking these technologies before. Oh yeah, including the hover pack. I've seen the hover pack, but I've never used it. Okay, so then aluminum production. Yeah, I have never done aluminum production before. I have no idea what these recipes are going to look like, but I assume they're going to be pretty complicated to work with. Hover pack requires aluminum. Logistics, okay. So yeah, aluminum's going to be sort of like steel, the next major gating resource, where you just need it for everything. Okay, and finally being able to deal with radiation would be nice. Control system development. Interesting. Okay. Oh, and then... Okay, so this is nuclear power. Oh man, yeah, it's everything in tier 8 that I'm especially excited for. Drones seem really exciting to be used for shipping stuff aerially across the map. That seems very cool, but that's a ways out. Gonna need a lot of aluminum production before then, I assume. And then nuclear. So yeah, that's the next big power production. Yeah, I wasn't sure how this was laid out, because part of me was still putting off building a turbo fuel plant, hoping that if like nuclear power was like right here, for example, or something like that, I might have just put off building turbo fuel for power and instead focused on rushing nuclear and built that setup instead. But this is too far out, at least I think. I'm already pushing the limits of my existing coal plant, and I could build more coal plants, but at this point I think I should probably just be using fuel generators instead. Okay, but yeah, very excited to experiment with this. So I've never built nuclear before, but my understanding from hearing about it is that, it's a pretty complex setup, and it involves producing nuclear waste, which you can't feed into an awesome sink. And of course, just about all the products are radioactive. So it's probably going to be pretty hard to deploy, because you'd have to, basically puzzle out the whole setup and then start feeding in resources and hope that it all works, because with the whole area being irradiated, you don't want to spend much of any time near it once it's running, and debugging it on the fly would probably be pretty difficult. I am really excited for it, though. Okay, and then, like, advanced aluminum production. Resource well extractor. Collects pressurized resources when placed on the activated subnodes. Resource well activates resource well by pressurizing the underground resource. Okay, so maybe this is like all of the like gases and like water fissures that we've seen around before. Oh, scannable resource water. Yeah, so... Oh, and maybe you can get crude oil out of such things as well. Nitrogen gas. Okay. Nickel enrichment. Interesting. So maybe this is like processing of waste, of nuclear waste, something like that. Gosh, okay. Yeah, getting very, very complicated. I'm sure that our progress is going to be a lot slower through these two tiers than it has been through all of the previous ones. Okay, well, I have plenty of stuff to automate in the meantime. So I figure I'll continue focusing on that. But definitely the next step would be locating somewhere for aluminum production. That was not something I can scan for, of course. Not until I unlock it. I could probably unlock that. 100, 250, 500. I can't remember what my motor situation is. I might not have enough motors. So that's probably something I'll look at later. Figure I should move on to the next couple of factories. Try to get those operating efficiently, and this one. And then, once I've actually got motors and computers and heavy modular frames automated, then I'll start worrying about hunting down sources of bauxite. All right, well, very exciting. Nice to see that whatever it is looking even more imposing. And yeah, I will continue getting on setting up the skeleton of the exotics factory and then the electronics factory after that. And we'll see how it goes. Talk to you all soon. That's going to be the end of today's episode. Thank you all for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next one.